You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholic, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a trunk, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club, buy some bottles, impress them girls. It's more than life.
Fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And this evening, we just have the follow up and post game for the final game of the season. You know, the Saints didn't get much help, even though they were able to win their game 48-17 over the Falcons, but just couldn't get any help at all from any of the other teams that they needed to win. But you know that really falls on them for not taking care of their business earlier in the season. Let's get into this game here. There's some things. There's definitely a lot of things people are talking about besides the actual game, but they're talking about things that have happened after the game and whether those are uh, fireable offenses or cuttable offenses. But let's just get into the start of the game at least. So can I get a menu? And so the start of the game was just big plays by the Atlanta Falcons. You know, the game, the first quarter of that game couldn't have gone any better for Desmond Ridder and the Falcons. You know, just the first two plays. Not the first two plays, but the first two touchdown drives that they had were all set up by like big chunk plays, big explosive plays. You know, the first one was a John like a 15-yard Jonnu Smith pass and touchdown, which was set up by like of course an ex-Buccaneer coming back to haunt the Saints. Scotty Miller set that up with a big run, catch and run, and then Bijan Robinson on the other one that was still in the first quarter made Alontae Taylor look like an absolute clown. So it's got people questioning should he be a nickel or a dime corner, or should he just not play those positions anymore? Where should he be designated? But he ended up making up for it later in the game. But really, uh, with a couple big catches by Scotty Miller, the touchdown by Jonnu Smith, and then the big catch and run by Bijan Robinson. The Falcons they really didn't do a whole lot after that. The Saints pretty much played them neck and neck in the first half, and then Saints they just absolutely shut the Falcons out and played a perfect game uh, of themselves. You know, couldn't have been much better in the second half. You know, scoring 14 in the third and 17 in the fourth, and uh, keeping the Falcons scoreless in the second half. That doesn't get much better than that. You'd look at Desmond Ritter's stats and you'd think, oh, this team probably won, or the game was closer than it was, because he was 22 for 30 for 229 yards passing, two touchdowns and an interception. But thing you need to look at is their rushing yards. The Saints didn't allow very many rushing yards at all to the Falcons. They only allowed 78 yards rushing, and I think that's probably led to this game going the way it did, because it definitely the Falcons, if they had a game plan coming into this game, and they were thinking that the game plan that they had earlier in the year against the Saints worked pretty well, and it did because they won. They didn't try to stick to that again in this game. They didn't want to ground and pound and get every bit of yards that they can on the ground. That's definitely they definitely got away from that. And I wonder if that's because they had two or three, what, three or four explosive plays through the air, you know, or in the first quarter that they got outside of themselves, you know, thinking that, oh well, we can, there's something here, we found something here with these big explosive plays on the Saints when really they should have continued to try to pound the rock and keep stay true to who you are. And the Falcons definitely didn't do that in this game. So the game definitely got out of hand in the second half. Saints won 48-17. Pretty disappointing and annoying, honestly, that the Saints play their best game of the season, like it's when it's completely meaningless. I mean, it had meaning because if some things would have fell their way, they could have still made the playoffs. But this reminds me so much of I guess it would have been the 2021 season when Sean Payton was still here, and it's at the end of the year. The Saints. I think the Saints were maybe 8-8 then, or they were 8-7 or something like that. I'm trying to think if they finished the season. They finished the season at either 9-7 or 9-8. I can't remember if they were playing 17 games yet in 2021. But anyways, they had that game against the Falcons. Paulson Adebo had a great game and had like a crazy interception in that game, and they just completely dominated the Falcons in the 2021 season finale. And they just like this game where they had the little Carolina Buccaneers score bug up in the corner. They had that with the Rams versus the 49ers. I'm trying to think if it was the Rams versus the 49ers or Rams versus Seahawks. Anyways, that was the same year that the Rams won the Super Bowl actually, and for some reason they couldn't beat I want to say it was the 49ers because they got swept in the regular season by the 49ers and then beat them in the NFC Championship game I think is how it went. So yeah, it was very like they were like one of the top seeded teams, um, playing against a division rival. They didn't even put up much of a fight in that game in the 2021. They kind of got the Rams kind of got blown out in that game, and uh, can't say it's much different in this one with the Carolina and the Buccaneers game, just because the the Carolina Panthers, I guess they kept it close because they only allowed 9 points, and there were two scenarios in that game where DJ Chark fumbled a touchdown basically as he's diving in the end zone. He fumbled and it went for a touchback, and that comes right back to me on saying that I don't care that much about that rule. A lot of people hate the loss of the fumble in the end zone being a touchdown. I said if you don't like it, don't fumble in the end zone. Well, that came back to bite us at the end of the year, of course, because that happened in one of the games the Saints needed the Buccaneers to lose, and I think they also had a touchdown called back for like pass interference or holding or something like that. So it wasn't meant to be. But the Saints they showed out, and them looking so good in the last game of the season, leaves you wanting more, because you finally got to see what like the final product of this team was going to be, and then the season's over, and I really think the Saints would have a lot better chance of beating the Philadelphia Eagles than the Buccaneers do. I mean, the hopeless Buccaneers. I know that they're like 5-1 in their last 6 games too, but just with the performance that they put out against the Saints like what 2-3 weeks ago, and then what they look like against Carolina, the worst team in the league. I don't know. I think if the Saints came with their A game, I think they would beat the Philadelphia Eagles in the dome. But I guess we'll never know. It'll be interesting to see what kind of performance the Buccaneers put up against them, whether it's respectable or not, or if it makes Saints fans even madder, making them think or know that the Saints could have got a win in the playoffs because of possibly how bad the Buccaneers look or how close the game is. Anyway, so let's move on from this game a little bit. Sticking with the game, but talking about some rookies. This 2023 draft class is looking kind of nice now. I talked during injury report how it was kind of frustrating that just when you think you're going to get um, Kendra Miller back, you have like a setback or something like that, or or there's just a stop in progression of his ankle injury or whatever he's been dealing with. And then this week leading up to this game, it looked like he was saying how healthy he was and how good he's like this is the best he's felt all season. And during practice, you see him out there running around and looking good. And then, of course, the Friday leading up to this game, he comes down. He has the illness, so that's leaving in question to me of whether he's going to play or not. And it's just that was going to be really annoying. That was going to have me slowly start to jump off of Kendra Miller a little bit because I hold out for these young players, especially if you're drafted in like the first 3 rounds or first 4 rounds. You got to give these players a chance to develop. So I'm not. There's already people trying to call Kendra Miller a bust. I'm not willing to call him a bust yet, just because you hadn't seen him play. How can you call someone a bust when they haven't even played? And honestly, the little bit I've seen of Kendra Miller, it reminds me a lot of Alvin Kamara, with the ridiculous balance and the good catching ability he has. But the difference that you saw in him in this game against the Falcons is that explosiveness. He's got another gear compared to Alvin Kamara. I think Alvin Kamara is kind of worn down. You don't see those home run hitting plays from Alvin Kamara anymore. I just think it's age. At 28, he's going to be 29 years old. That's just that just happens to a running back, and that's something Kendra Miller brought on Sunday with some explosiveness and some electricity to the run game with his 13. He had 13 carries for 73 yards with an 8.6 yard average and 1 touchdown. And that 1 touchdown that he had was ridiculous. It looked like it was going to be a play that was going to go for like a 10-yard loss, and he was able to cut back inside and stretch out for the touchdown. Like that alone, that was just like, I think that was only like a 3-yard run. And that was like maybe the most impressive touchdown run this year, just off of that 3-yard run, with how terrible Jamal Williams was in this. Every carry Jamal Williams was getting, he was only getting like 1 or 2 yards in a cloud of dust, or losing yards. Like on that play, if Jamal Williams would have been in that situation scenario, he'd have lost 10 yards on that goal line carry. But Jamal Williams, had 14 carries for just 26 yards, which is a 1.9 yard per carry. And then we have he got a touchdown, little suspect touchdown that he got, but I'll come back to that here at the end here. And then other rookies that really showed out is A.T. Perry, Michael Thomas, who don't want to disrespect Michael Thomas or anything. He was a great player in New Orleans for years. He was on a Hall of Fame arc. But just some drama and injuries have led to his time, I think, coming to an end in New Orleans. And the Saints have a perfect player to replace him with, because that's something that they've had trouble all year with, is like the contested catch and jump balls. And I mean, you've seen passes and throws and scenarios where you need a contested catch or you need a jump ball. And Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, they just hadn't looked great or done very good at that. And I understand that. Rashid Shaheed, he's more of a speedster, and then Chris Olave is more of a precise route runner. But neither of those guys are like big guys, with big frames, that can go up and get jump balls. But that changes a whole lot when you influx a 6'5", 205-pound wide receiver into your receiving core. And I think that he showed A.T. Perry showed the, on Sunday against the Falcons that he can be that. He can be that jump ball possession receiver, and I mean he's even gone deep and and caught deep balls and shown that he's got speed too. He had some great plays against the Falcons. I had that one jump ball for a touchdown on AJ Terrell, made AJ Terrell his son on that play. But yeah, all the receivers, really, the young receiving core that Saints have built looked nice on Sunday. But definitely A.T. Perry, who had just 3 catches, but it was for 53 yards, which is a 17.7 yard average, and that had those 2 touchdowns, big time touchdowns where he's just bodying people and going up and just mossing people and just showing that he's the bigger guy. But talking about the other receivers, everyone, this is kind of your future, uh, just in a microcosm. This is your future at receiver, definitely right here with Rashid Shaheed had 3 catches for 65 yards with the 21.7 yard average, but he had a touchdown as well. Looked good going deep and then going over the top of the receiver. And then Chris Olave, he had 3 catches for 56 yards, which is a 18.7 yard average with 1 touchdown. And the touchdown he had was crazy. It was one where as he's going into the end zone, it like kind of tips up off his hands and the defender's finger and defender's like helmet, and then he double clutches and double catches it for a touchdown. That was just a nuts play. Chris Olave and just got done hammering Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave for not being able to be good at like jump balls and contested catches and plays like that. But some of the craziest catches this season have come off of Chris Olave with a defender hanging on one of his arms and tipping it one-handed back to himself and plays like that. So don't want to be too hard on Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave, but you got a solid receiving core, and if you can continue to get a little bit more out of Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill, and Foster Monroe can be that blocker for you, you're gonna look good. Your future looks pretty positive there. So the the 2023 rookie class looking nice with Kendra Miller finally showing what he can do, which I always knew that he had something. There was some explosiveness and more juice, in Kendra Miller and any of the other running backs they had. Jamal Williams pretty much a bust this season, and then Alvin Kamara he's just not the same guy he was 3 or 4 years ago. But let's see. So that's most of the game there. Let's see. So Saints are eliminated from the playoffs. Just go over this real quick again. So the Saints were needing a loss by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which I didn't. I thought that was the most unlikely scenario that the Saints had of actually possibly getting in the playoffs. Just a loss by Carol or a loss by the Buccaneers to Carolina. It just seemed pretty unlikely to me, which turned out to be fact. But then we had the afternoon games where the Saints could have still gotten in as a 7th seed. But those teams weren't able to pull out any stops either to help the Saints. But I will say it kept me for about the first half of those games. It kept me kind of interested, but the Bears, they weren't able to do anything to the Green Bay Packers, even though they kept it close for a little while. And then the score that I think the Packers won 17-9 or something like that. Yeah, I think it was an 8-point game. So it was always like a one-score game throughout that game. But that was the game that the Saints would have needed to win next, the most important game that the Saints would need the Bears to beat the Packers in that game. So which I thought that was pretty likely. I definitely could have seen that happening with how the Bears have been playing and how Justin Fields had looked over the last month or so. So it was a little surprising that game wasn't closer, it wasn't more competitive, or that the Bears couldn't even win really. But the other game that ended up being a lot closer and a bigger surprise to me was the Seahawks. Yeah, the Seahawks versus the Cardinals. And hell, the Cardinals controlled the majority of that game and had the lead late in that game. And it's good. It's good that the Green Bay Packers didn't win, because that would have been like just a perfect example of like getting your heart just completely ripped out of your chest if the Saints would have if the Saints would have if the Green Bay Packers would have lost to them, and then the Saints fans would have been watching the Seahawks Cardinals game later, and then they end up losing off of like 1 point and having missed a field goal earlier in the game. Like that would have just been a gut wrenching way to lose, but an even more Saintsier way for the season to come to an end. But thankfully, it didn't go like that. The Saints got put out of their misery a little bit earlier, and it's still even so. The way this season's come to an end, it was pretty fancy, to play your best game of the season in the last game of the season, and basically a meaningless game. But you know, it happens. I wasn't overly surprised, and I wasn't. My heart wasn't broken because I was already prepared for the season to be over. Okay, so that's that. So the season's over, and I'm sure there's a lot of people talking about the last play of the game, and what that means about Dennis Allen, and what that means about Jameis Winston. And if you hadn't heard yet, the last play of the game happened after like what was it, like a 27-yard interception return by Tyrann Matthews, I think something like that. And how he got how he even got chased down and tackled by what, Chris Lindstrom, the guard for the Falcons at the 1 yard line. Should have been a pick six. I don't know what he was looking over his shoulder and high stepping and lollygagging at the end of that play, anyways. But yeah, Tyrann Matthews, he had a great season, had 4 interceptions, and was one of the best players in the secondary this year. But he should have had a touchdown on that play anyways, and we probably wouldn't even be talking about this. But anyways, he was tackled at the 1 yard line, and for some reason the Saints feel the need to bring in their backup quarterback for the last play of the game, or for the victory formation, and then just out of that play, they get Jameis Winston, and gets Jamal Williams a touchdown. That's what he was known for. The year prior in Detroit was being a touchdown machine. So it was almost going to be. I understand where they're coming from, how that would be kind of tragic, that he goes this whole season without getting a touchdown. So they wanted to get their guy a touchdown, but there's more to the story than that. When I first watched it and saw it, watching it live, I thought they just went for a touchdown and ran up the score, and they were doing like a tush push or something. I didn't really realize like they were in victory formation, or that's what they were planning to do. I guess I got kind of confused, really. I think I realized that they were in victory formation, but then when they scored the touchdown, I thought they just like did a sneak or a tush push. I didn't even really realize that Jamal Williams was the one that scored the touchdown. And I loved it. But before I knew the whole background and the story behind it, I loved it. I was like, oh, we got uh, the uh, 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 Dennis Allen, who's kind of showing that he's kind of shisty and feisty and petty. I thought there was no way that Dennis Allen would do something like that. Uh, just running up the score and giving a big fu to the Falcons, and I thought that was awesome. I think a good portion of the Houdat Nation was probably going to come around a little bit on Dennis Allen after that play, and I thought it was so hilarious afterwards with Mike, the Falcons coach, Mike Smith, all heated about it and saying that was effing bullshit, and so monotone Dennis Allen saying, "Yeah, I understand that. I understand that." I just thought that was just kind of like a kind of a sly way of like throwing that back in Mark Smith's face. But realistically, we found out he really did understand why it was bullshit, because later on, during a press conference, Dennis Allen actually apologizes to the Falcons, like make me want to puke. Pretty much threw up in my mouth uh, when I heard that and seen that. And he just took a great moment, a great game, and just flushed it down the toilet by saying that he apologized to the Falcons, apologized to Mike Smith, that the call that was called from the sidelines was to kneel it out and end the game in victory formation, and that his players, Jameis Winston, Jamal Williams, I guess, went rogue and scored out of the victory formation instead of doing the call that he called. And that just makes it so confusing. So does Dennis Allen not have control of his team, or has he lost the locker room? Because that's really what it spews, and you feel after this. That's how you feel after this. It's a very very weird situation. But I, I think the only part that I probably don't like about it is that they did it out of the victory formation. So I understand that's kind of a little classless, but other than that, I feel that people are kind of making a little bit big of a deal about this. It feels very similar to the Jason Pierre-Paul situation, when all the Saints media people were making such a huge deal about them not being able to retain him, and the Falcons signing him off of their practice squad, and made that out as a huge deal, as if they lost another Trey Hendricks or something, when really it turned out to not matter. And Jason Pierre-Paul was like a free agent like a week or two later. Like, people blew that out of proportion. I think people are blowing this out of proportion a little bit, and I think should, people should just try to enjoy the win, the victory, over the Falcons. Like a dominant performance like that, getting their head coach fired. I mean, come on, there's got to be some solace and find some joy from this game, which a lot of people feel like it's just how could a head coach and how could a team make a 48-17 victory over the Atlanta Falcons, the Saints and the Houdats biggest rivalry, and make it seem so sour afterwards, even though I can see where you'd feel that way a little bit because they looked so great in the last game of the season, and it's kind of all for naught because they didn't make the playoff. But that's really the only reason I'm a little salty and sour about it. But I I think the whole uh, running up the score, uh, Jameis Winston changing the call, which I almost put that. A lot of people, I think there are a lot of people that are kind of attacking Jameis Winston for doing that. And uh, Shannon Sharp said he thought that they should should cut him because of doing something like that, like um, disobeying the head coach, And it just, when I hear that as Jameis Winston's kind of the head of the thing, even though he said the team and the guys wanted to get Jamal Williams a touchdown. I just that's just a very Jameis Winston type of thing. Like, I'm not surprised that Jameis Winston is kind of the head of the table for something like this. So it's just, I don't know. I'm just not surprised, and uh, well, I'm just not surprised that Jameis Winston's the leader of it. But the whole situation could have been um, could have been better if Dennis Allen would have ate the blame for this, instead of outright saying, like, yeah, my players don't listen to me. They call other plays when I tell them to kneel it out. I don't know. It's just weird. But that's enough of that. It'll be interesting to see how people feel about this in a week or two. So on to my player of the game, a hot take, and game score. See if these were any good at all. So my player of the game, and I mentioned like stipulations for this pick. My player of the game was Peyton Turner. Peyton Turner was my player of the game, and I put stipulations on this. Like, all it would take for Peyton Turner to be the player of the game would be not necessarily get a sack or a strip sack or anything like that, or get maybe just a tackle for loss, or making it through the entire game, or getting a couple tackles would be enough for him to to be the player of the game. And he didn't even have any tackles in this game. He didn't have any tackles for loss. He didn't have any sacks. All he had was two quarterback hits and a forced fumble, or not a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. So that fumble recovery, it was a garbage time fumble recovery where he's doing the bow-legged dance afterwards. Like that, that's enough for me to certify him as my player of the game. So I'm getting a point for that, because Peyton Turner, he made it all the way through healthy, and he recovered a fumble. So he made himself known, and a lot of people probably after that fumble recovery were saying, Peyton who? But I know who you are. Just like your rookies and Kendra Miller, I hadn't given up on him yet. And then hot take for this game. So I thought going in this game that that we were going to see both Falcons quarterbacks in this game, and the Falcons were kind of shysty with this. Like the day leading up to it, they were releasing a lot of reports about Taylor Heineke's like health status, and that it looked like he was probably going to play. And then like what an hour before kickoff, um, Taylor Heineke's out and Desmond Ritter's in as your starter. So that was kind of a shifty move there by the Falcons. I feel if Taylor Heineke would have started, we would have probably got to see both of them, but he didn't even play. You saw that Logan Woodside, or yeah, Logan Woodside. You saw him later throw an interception. But yeah, I almost want to give myself like half a point for that, because it was almost leading up to the game, you really thought we were going to get to see Taylor Heineke, but they pulled the old okey doke and started Desmond Ritter, who had maybe just statistically had one of his best passing games, with the 22 completions and 291 yards and two touchdowns. I mean, you probably say that was probably good enough. Definitely his best game ever. So I want to give myself half point, because the Falcons were trying to uh, make it seem as if Taylor Heineke was going to be the starter, but he ended up getting Desmond Ritter instead. And then I thought the Saints were going to give up 200 yards rushing again in this game against the Falcons, but they did a good job stopping Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. Bijan Robinson, he did most of his damage through the air, catching the ball. But Bijan Robinson, he had 11 carries for 28 yards, which is just a 2.5 yard average. That's good to see after he kind of tore the Saints up in their first meeting. And then Tyler Algier, he had 6 carries for 24 yards, which is a 4 yard average, and no touchdowns. And let's see what this total is. They had just a total of 78 yards rushing, and the Saints had 154, which was, I think, similar to the amount that they had in the first game. So the Saints, they kind of used the Falcons' game plan against them. Let's see here. And so I don't really give myself much credit for my hot takes, except that it seemed there that the Saints were maybe going to get both a little dose of Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ritter, but we didn't get them. And then my game score, I picked the Saints to win 27-17. So hey, I would give myself like a half a point for that as well, because I got the score right for the Falcons. They only got that 17 points early on in the first half, the first quarter. It looked like they were way on their way to scoring probably twice as many points as the 17 that I had them marked down for. But hey, I didn't I didn't predict the 21 extra points that the Saints would be scoring in the second half. I did not see that coming. But yeah, that was I would say just for picks, it's kind of like the Saints. Some of my best picks and predictions come in the last game of the year. So I guess we're very similar in that regard. And then just throwing out honorable mentions of players that teams hate, but you can't leave this out because Derek Carr, he did have a really good game. He had definitely pretty much hands down his best game of the year. Derek Carr was 22 for 28, 264 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Those 4 touchdowns came to his wide receiver trio: Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, and A.T. Perry. And then see if there's really anything. Really, really wasn't much to mention on the defense. The defense was just pretty much solid all the way around. Nathan Shepard had their only sack in the game, and then Tyrann Matthews had the interception that led that should have been a pick six that led to the drama. And then Alontae Taylor, who got made look like a clown and looked really bad diving for an interception that he didn't really have any chance at. That gave up the 71-yard touchdown to Bijan Robinson. He came back later on in the game and made a big solid tackle, and he even got his second interception of the year. So shout out to some of those defenders there, and just a second shout out to Rashid Shaheed as being the Saints' only Pro Bowler this season. So this season, obviously, it could have went better, and it's so on brand, and just that's just how the NFL, that the game that comes back to haunt you the most is the game this season that the Saints should have won the most, and that's the game that comes back to haunt them the most was the loss to they had a 17 to nothing lead over the Green Bay Packers in the fourth quarter. And who gets in at the last spot, the seventh seed this year? Of course, it's the Green Bay Packers. Like the Saints wouldn't even have been fighting all that much for their playoff spot against the Falcons if they'd have just won that. They'd have been 10-7 over the 9-8 Buccaneers. But of course, the most important, gruelingest, gut wrenching loss that they have this season is, of course, the one that comes back to haunt them and essentially keep them out of the playoffs. But alas, that's just what it is being a Saints fan, and I key it as it's very similar to how they weren't able to make the playoffs in 2021. You know, they had the score bug up there. I had to cover it up both times because it's just too distracting for me. But this season was fun. You know, it's wild that they have such a good point differential, and win loss uh, don't add up. You know, for how good you would think they were from like afar. You know, especially Derek Carr, who looked great the last month and a half, and the defense. You know, Saints had really been good the last pretty much all December, besides the game against the Rams. But that turned out to be really the last one that they really needed, but they weren't able to get it. But now I guess we'll be transitioning into the off season and drafts, and maybe you'll see some more people jump on the New Orleans Pelicans bandwagon because if you're wanting some wins in the sports world, that's definitely a team to lean on, to side on. But anyways, it was a good season. Obviously, it could have been better if they made the playoffs. I would assume I would assume that Dennis Allen isn't going to get fired. If there's any kind of wholesale changes there, it's probably going to be Pete Carmichael. And there's even been some rumblings of John Gruden being hired on with the team and the coaching staff. I'm wondering like if he gets hired on, what his position will be. And there's a lot of people out there that don't like him, think he's a disgusting, horrible human being. But I don't know. I guess I have a little different feeling on things like that. Like obviously, I think people can change. You know, people can change, and this is NFL football, grown man football. Like that, I'll be honest. I just whatever the Saints can do to win, I'm on board for it. And you could say that that John Gruden, it looked like he kind of had the had had the Raiders kind of turned around. He had Henry Ruggs out there catching deep bombs. And until Henry Ruggs uh, got in that car wreck and killed somebody, and then John Gruden getting fired, they were looking pretty good. Beat, I think they blew out or had a pretty impressive win over Kansas City for like the first time in Derek Carr's career. And well, they made, even after Gruden retired, they made the playoffs. So I'm all for bringing in John Gruden as, if nothing else, player control. With his history, I don't know if the players would, with his negative history, I don't know if the players would respect him more than Dennis Allen. Maybe they would, but I'm here for it. I'm not completely against it, but I guess we'll find out in the coming weeks, months, and uh, the 2024-2025 season, and I'm here for it. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you. So who dat? And can I get a check, please?